Christopher Columbus traveled 4 times from Spain across the Atlantic Ocean in 1492, 1493, 1498, and 1502. Despite his best efforts, he was never able to locate a straight maritime path west from Europe to Asia. Instead, he discovered the Americas. His expeditions heralded the start of centuries of exploration and colonization of North and South America, even though he did not actually found the so-called New World, because millions of people already lived there. Leaders of several European countries funded journeys overseas in the 15th and 16th centuries in the anticipation that explorers would come across large uncharted territories and enormous amounts of money. This age of discovery, also known as the Age of Exploration, was first experienced by the Portuguese. Beginning around 1420, tiny Portuguese ships called caravels sped along the African coast transporting enslaved people from Asia and Africa as well as spices, gold, and other valuables to Europe. Did you know? The idea that one may go from Europe to Asia by sailing westward was not first put forth by Christopher Columbus. In fact, according to experts, the notion predates even the notion that the Earth is a sphere. That is, it originates from early Rome. Spain, in particular, was anxious to partake in the allegedly endless riches of the Far East, as were other European countries. By the end of the 15th century, Spain's Reconquista, the expulsion of Jews and Muslims from the kingdom following years of war, was finished, and the country switched its focus to exploration and conquest in other parts of the world. It is thought that Christopher Columbus was born in Genoa, Italy, in the year 1451. His father was a wool dealer. He obtained employment on a commercial ship while still a teenager. He continued to sail until 1476, when pirates attacked his ship as it sailed north along the Portuguese coast. The boat sank, but the young Columbus drifted to shore on a piece of wood and traveled to Lisbon, where he later learned mathematics, astronomy, cartography, and navigation. He also started formulating the idea that would alter the course of history. It was practically hard to travel by land from Europe to Asia around the end of the 15th century. The journey was grueling and lengthy, and it was challenging to avoid running into enemy armies. Portuguese explorers used the sea to circumnavigate the Cape of Good Hope and travel south along the coast of West Africa in order to solve this issue. Instead of circumnavigating the vast African continent, Columbus had a different idea. Why not sail west over the Atlantic? The young navigator's math was poor, despite his solid logic. He made the mistaken claim that the Earth's circumference was much smaller than his contemporaries thought it was, leading him to believe that traveling by boat from Europe to Asia should be not only feasible, but also relatively simple thanks to the existence of a Northwest Passage that had not yet been discovered. He proposed his idea to representatives in Portugal and England, but it wasn't until the Spanish kings Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile that he found a sympathetic hearing. Columbus desired notoriety and wealth, along with the chance to spread Catholicism over the world. Ferdinand and Isabella shared this desire. Columbus, a devoted Catholic, had the same enthusiasm for this potential. According to the terms of Columbus' agreement with the Spanish kings, he would be entitled to a noble title, and the governorship of whatever countries he came across, as well as 10% of any riches he discovered. Columbus and his crew departed from Spain on 3 ships, the Nia, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, on August 3, 1492. On October 12, the ships arrived at their destination, possibly San Salvador, in the Bahamas, not the East Indies as Columbus had believed. Columbus searched for the pearls, precious stones, gold, silver, spices, and other items in commerce whatsoever he had promised to his Spanish clients for months as he sailed from island to island, in what is now known as the Caribbean, but he did not discover much. He left for Spain in January 1493, leaving several dozen men in a makeshift community on Hispaniola, modern-day Haiti in the Dominican Republic. Throughout his first journey, he kept a thorough journal. Between August 3 and November 6, 1492, Christopher Columbus kept a notebook in which he recorded everything, from the weather to the moods of his crew, to the wildlife he saw, including dolphins and birds. More disturbingly, it also contained his justification for why the locals should be sold into slavery, as well as his early opinions of them. They brought us parrots, cotton balls, spears, and many other things, which they swapped for glass beads and hawks' bells, he wrote. All of their possessions were freely exchanged. They had attractive features, and were well built with decent bodies. Since I showed them a sword, they took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance even, though they do not possess weapons and do not know how to use them. No iron is present there. They'd make great housekeepers. We could force them to do whatever we want, if we had 50 guys to dominate them all. When Columbus got back, he gave Isabella the journal. Columbus made his way back to the Americas in September 1493, about 6 months later. Along with some of his ship's crew and hundreds of natives, who had been taken into slavery, he discovered the Hispaniola town to be completely wrecked and put his brothers Bartolomeo and Diego Columbus in charge of rebuilding it. He then continued his largely futile search for gold and other items by moving west. His gang now included a sizable number of native people who had been held as slaves by Europeans. He sent about 500 slaves to Queen Isabella, instead of the monetary riches he had promised the Spanish kings. The queen was appalled and swiftly and firmly returned the explorer's gift, because she thought that any people Columbus found were Spanish subjects who could not be sold into slavery. Columbus made his third trip westward, across the Atlantic in May 1498, before returning to the tragic Hispaniola settlement, where the colonists had mounted a bloody uprising against the Columbus brothers' violence and incompetence. He traveled to Trinidad and the South American mainland. The situation was so terrible that the Spanish government sent a new governor to take control. Meanwhile, the native Taino people was wiped out as a result of being forced to work on plantations and find gold. Within 60 years after Columbus landed, only a few hundred of what may have been 250,000 Taino were left on their island. After being detained, Christopher Columbus was taken back to Spain in chains. The elderly Columbus persuaded the Spanish government to fund one last voyage across the Atlantic in 1502, even though he had been exonerated of the most serious charges and stripped of his noble titles. This time, Columbus reached Panama, a few miles from the Pacific Ocean, but had to leave 2 of his 4 ships due to storm damage and unfriendly inhabitants. The expedition returned to Spain empty-handed, where he passed away in 1506. In addition to not being the first European to travel to the New World, Christopher Columbus did not discover the Americas. Leif Erikson, a Viking explorer, had traveled to Greenland and Newfoundland in the 11th century. On the American continents, however, his expedition marked the beginning of centuries of exploration and exploitation. The Columbian exchange brought diseases, animals, food, and people from one society to another. Old World wheat became a staple meal in America, while American staples like corn, tomatoes, and potatoes were introduced into European diets. Latin American countries turned to African coffee and Asian sugar cane as cash crops. Columbus' reputation remains contentious today. While he is recognized as a courageous and groundbreaking explorer who changed the New World, his deeds also set in motion developments that would ultimately decimate the local populations he and his fellow explorers encountered. In addition to being recognized as a brave and innovative explorer who changed the New World, Christopher Columbus has some interesting quotes. Here is the quotes. By prevailing over all obstacles and distractions, one may unfailingly arrive at his chosen goal or destination. Riches don't make a man rich, they only make him busier. These people are very unskilled in arms. With 50 men, they could all be subjected and made to do all that one wished. I am a most noteworthy sinner, but I have cried out to the Lord for grace and mercy, and they have covered me completely. I have found the sweetest consolation, since I made it my whole purpose to enjoy His marvelous presence. My desire was not to pass any island without taking possession, so that, one having been taken, the same may be said of all. I have come to believe that this is a mighty continent, which was hitherto unknown. Tomorrow morning before we depart, I intend to land and see what can be found in the neighborhood. Each day, we understand better what the Indians say, and they us, so that very often, we are intelligible to each other. But in truth, should I meet with gold or spices in great quantity, I shall remain till I collect as much as possible, and for this purpose, I am proceeding solely in quest of them. Sailed this day 19 leagues, and determined to count less than the true number, that the crew might not be dismayed, if the voyage should prove long. There are trees of 1,000 sorts, and all have their several fruits, and I feel the most unhappy man in the world, not to know them, for I am well assured that they are all valuable. I bring home specimens of them, and also of the land. I ordered each man to be presented with something, as strings of 10, or a dozen glass beads apiece, and thongs of leather, all which they estimated highly. Those which came on board, I directed should be fed with molasses. I propose to construct a new chart for navigating, on which I shall delineate all the sea and lands of the ocean in their proper positions under their bearings. And further, I propose to prepare a book, and to put down all as it were in a picture, by latitude from the equator, and western longitude. Following the light of the sun, we left the old world. Gold is a treasure, and he who possesses it does all he wishes to in this world, and succeeds in helping souls into paradise. As soon as I arrived in the Indies, in the first island which I found, I took some of the natives by force, in order that they might learn, and might give me information of whatever there is in these parts. And so it was that they soon understood us, and we them, either by speech or by signs, and they have been very serviceable. After having dispatched a meal, I went ashore, and found no habitation save a single house, and that without an occupant. We had no doubt that the people had fled in terror at our approach, as the house was completely furnished. For the execution of the voyage to the Indies, I did not make use of intelligence, mathematics, or maps. No one should fear to undertake any task in the name of our Savior, if it is just and if the intention is purely for His holy service. For this purpose, I determined to keep an account of the voyage, and to write down punctually everything we performed or saw from day to day, as will hereafter appear. I believe that there are many herbs and many trees that are worth much in Europe, for dyes and for medicines, but I do not know, and this causes me great sorrow. Arriving at this cape, I found the smell of the trees and flowers so delicious that it seemed the pleasantest thing in the world. Their houses are all built in the shape of tents, with very high chimneys. I saw a boy of the crew purchasing javelins of them, with bits of platters and broken glass. I am not solicitous to examine particularly everything here, which indeed could not be done in 50 years, because my desire is to make all possible discoveries, and return to your highnesses, if it please our Lord, in April. Stood off and on during the night, determining not to come to anchor till morning, fearing to meet with shoals, continued our course in the morning, and as the island was found to be 6 or 7 leagues distant, and the tide was against us, it was noon when we arrived there. The Indians on board said that thence to Cuba was a voyage in their canoes of a day and a half, these being small dugouts without a sail. Such are their canoes. I departed thence for Cuba, for by the signs the Indians made of its greatness, and of its gold and pearls, I thought that it must be Cipango. I found that part of it toward San Salvador, extending from north to south 5 leagues, and the other side, which we coasted along, ran from east to west more than 10 leagues. Thank you for watching. See you on the next video.